Hey everybody, John Malanka with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well. This segment is brought to you by Aspen Green. Aspen Green is just a handful of USDA certified organic hemp and CBD brands, and all of its hemp is grown from the perfect topography and climate found in Colorado. Check out why purity matters at aspengreen.com and follow them on social channels at Aspen Green CBD. Use promo code UPGCBD for 20% off. Hey everybody, welcome back. John Malanka with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well. Today I have a special guest, really cool dude. I'm going to say cool dude. He's a California guy, now lives in Texas. Dr. Kevin Hoffarth. How are you doing, Kevin?
Great. How are you?
Good,
I like that intro. Wow.
The cool dude.
Here in Texas, you kind of got to hold back from being from California, so
yeah.
It's kind of nice to represent California a little bit more positively.
Well, you can be closet Californian now living in Texas too. So
yes.
I know a lot of people moving to Austin. So let's talk about, we'll talk about a bunch of things. I know you have a book. I want to help you with that. But let's talk about what's going on right now. Stress, anxiety, the immune system. And I know it's tough. I made a comment one time about how everyone's stressed, and one of our followers wrote and said, "Do you not realize what's going on in the world?" And I said, "You know what? You are right. I do know what's going on. People are losing their jobs. People aren't able to see their family, their kids, their grandkids. Hugs. I mean, I just started hugging my mom, and before, just to be safe, I was fist bumping and elbow bumping and stuff like that. And so let me get into the intro. I'll share your bio here. Stress and anxiety, it affects us all. It's becoming a modern epidemic in society today. And so I don't want to say this is the new normal, but it's amazing. You really didn't, I don't know, you and I are the same age. Did we hear a lot about stress, anxiety, depression, and those in our area? Because I have friends that have kids in high school and they're talking about stress, anxiety, depression. And and the world puts a lot of pressure on what we're doing here today. So, but anyway, let me talk about you. Kevin Hoffarth, he's the founder of BioFit Medicine and is a traditionally trained physician as well as a certified functional medicine physician who understands that isolating the body down to just systems like we see today in today's traditional specialty care model is not treating the whole patient. Dr. Hoffarth's background, experience, and training is only seen by a handful of physicians worldwide. He takes the most current medically based science and therapies of today to an untraditional and unprecedented level. Dr. Hoffarth passionately lives where he teaches. I think I love that. He understands that there is no one size fits all, which I always say, approach to any patient's health. It is imperative to take this approach to achieve and maintain sustainable results. I love this too. Your goal, so Dr. Hoffarth's goal is for you to feel your optimum, reduce your medication reliance over time, develop a lifetime of good habits, and lower disease burden in your future. So that's it. I love it. And so, you and I have spoken before, and I love your mindset, and that's why I wanted to get you back on the show. And so, what am I missing there? We went over a lot of what you do. I know you were based California here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, we were neighbors for a while, and then you uprooted your wife and your daughter and moved to Texas.
Yes.
How's that going?
Great. So we actually moved here 8 years ago.
Okay.
We were living in South Lake Tahoe, actually.
That's right.
The last spot, which is probably one of the most beautiful spots on the planet. Everybody says, "Why did you move?" And one of the reasons is we had a child, and we just wanted to not raise her in necessarily a mountain town, so that just didn't have as many opportunities that we thought. So we ended up in Austin. So
it's a great, booming city too.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's basically, I mean, if you haven't been to Austin, a lot of people will describe Austin as California, the California in Texas. So it was a pretty easy transition, to be honest.
What do they say? I know they have what's the saying about Austin? Not Austin City.
Keep Austin weird.
Keep Austin weird. I knew.
Portland has something if you have a lot of people like me from California, that's no problem. So
yeah. Well, good. So how was your stress level?
Well, it's funny because, in the last 6 months as a provider, I do functional medicine, but I do traditional medicine. It's kind of an integrated approach, and I always try to remind people that it's not a different medicine. We're talking about the same disease. It just kind of depends on where we're talking about in the disease spectrum. And most diseases are not way over here. They're about the 95% that are in the chronic stages that are slowly shifting towards a true disease state, as we like to call it and label it in traditional medicine. So, functional medicine is just looking at the earlier chapters in the book. And so, one of the reasons I wrote my book, Functional Medicine, the New Standard, was just to help people realize that, disease is I like to describe, as I put in my book, it's like a waterfall. And when you're at the waterfall edge, that the current is very powerful, and it wants to pull you off that edge onto what I call disease. Now, disease, it doesn't really matter what you call it. It could be heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, cancer, dementia, any of those. That's not the important part that we tend to get a little bit stuck on. It's really the river journey that got us to that waterfall, and why we got on the raft in the first place. And so I really like to kind of say, okay, traditional medicine, there are some tools there that can help push you back from that current. But then we need to shift you away from the waterfall's pull and get you backwards into that river, the backwards journey, in order to start shifting you back towards, without disease.
Yeah. You talk about the flow of what happened here that brought you here. And, you and I have talked about my wife, Corinne, who passed away of pancreatic cancer a few years ago. I spoke with a doctor after that, and she was a psychotherapist, actually. And it was, we scheduled 2 appointments. I scheduled 2 appointments, and as soon as I get it was 2 weeks out prior. And I said, let me get 2 back to back. And the very first one I had was the Monday after Corinne passed. And she said, I heard what happened. Would you like to? And I said, yeah, let me do it. So we did a thing. And so she said, can I ask you what happened to Corinne 20 years ago? And so you talking about something, the flow of what took place over here to here. And, and I look back, and what we're going through right now with stress, stress, there's the fight or flight that can help get things done, run quicker if a bear is chasing you, or a lion or tiger. But there's also, high stress with cortisol affects the sleep, affects inflammation in the body, and throws you off, which could lead to disease, heart failure, diabetes, and something as severe as cancer as well. And so that's a great analogy, how you're talking about what's happening at the beginning.
By curiosity, did you come up with something that you thought?
Yeah, well, I'll say it. Probably, Corinne went through an ugly divorce, and she was really felt like it, 20 something years ago, and she just felt, oh my God, how did that help? How am I doing this? I come from 2 loving parents, 2 loving grandparents, great grandparents. And she says, and me, and it's, and so she just took that extra stress, and and being a mom with 2 kids, and, and I think, and she said, that was a really tough time for me, that I just I failed.
Yeah.
And so she went through a lot. And I remember at one point she said, that she thought she had Lyme's disease, and she didn't have Lyme, but she was drive her kids to school, and she would start going home, and she'd have to pull over because she was so tired, and she would just sit there and fall asleep in the car just for an hour, a half hour, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, just because her energy level was gone. So she went and had, and it was just the stress. And so, and so when I hear that, and I've shared that with other people that have called and said, let's see if we can work on the stress here. because it can affect us a lot. I know you're about to say something. I spoke with a woman yesterday. She called, and her dad's 85, and he's not eating. He's lost 50 pounds. And I said, and he has neuropathy. And I said, is he battling something, cancer, diabetes? She goes, no. And that's the thing. We don't know what's going on, but he's so stressed out because we sold the family house, the COVID, he's not out being out with his friends, he's not active. And I'm just seeing that stress, and he's always been that worry wart his whole life. And I just said, you have, if you're able to, see if you can either talk to a therapist, get a massage, go to acupuncturist, but he has to start eating to, bring that in there. So anyway, that's what was shared after Corinne passed. And I knew that, we shared everything with each other. So, it's
yeah.
not...
and it's so interesting. I love, this is actually a perfect kind of segue into stress. It's, all disease has to have like a starting point. And for your wife, Corinne, maybe, and this is the case, I think, for a lot of us, is that stress can be one of the triggers. One thing I mentioned in my book that I really tried to kind of emphasize is that there are 5 what I call stamp triggers. They fall under stress, toxins, allergens, microbes, bugs like COVID, and poor diet. Now, some of these are actually very visible. You can test for them. You can test for, or you could see your foods, and, people are gaining weight. And we always kind of tend to focus on the kitchen, and the kitchen's extremely important. But let's talk about stress, where it's actually one of the 2 most powerful of the triggers: stress and poor diet, the 2 bookends of that stamp. Yeah. And stress, most of the time you can't visualize it. You can just see its impact. So like, for example, Corinne, she went through a divorce, all the steps that she's like, how did I get here? Now I have 2 children. Gosh, her story is unfortunately very common. Yeah. And she's trying to raise these 2 children. Probably much of it was on her own. I don't know the story, but there's probably a lot of pressure there as a mother. And so that chronic, putting this in from a physiologic standpoint, we're initially meant to have a cortisol response. Okay. Yeah. This is our adaptive response to a threat to our survival. This is normal. Okay. But unfortunately, the divorce doesn't go away. The kids are always there. The fact that maybe her economic situation was more challenging at that time. All these things are just trigger of cortisol. Now, cortisol is neither bad nor good. I like to remind people that anything that's made in the body is not bad or good. It's about a balance. Unfortunately, if the trigger is constant, then you're having this release of cortisol, which is a hormone that literally just prepares the body for that stress response. So it prepares for the production of sugars, through the liver, and it changes the immune system, changes, our sense, and people talk about the fight or flight scenario. Yeah, it gets our heart going, it gets our breathing going, as if we were running from a bear. But in today's world, rarely is there a visible bear. That bear is all the things that Corinne was going through. And, if everybody out there who is watching, with all the, mess of COVID and all the pandemic dominoes it's caused, it's almost unfathomable to appreciate each person's individual status and how much it's impacted their life. And so that there's that cortisol push. What's really intriguing about that, and with cortisol, for example, and it's much more complicated than just that, but trying to keep it in a binary kind of design here, yet the body is very web-like. It's a very complicated mesh of systems. But I like to remind people that balance in our body also has built-in fuse boxes in a sense. Okay, so if there's too much cortisol over here, we have another system. A lot of people call it the parasympathetic system.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that's the major system that kind of tries to counter the sympathetic pathways. But going a little bit deeper than that, there's the endocannabinoid system. And because we're talking about CBD today, and how its effect on stress and immunity. And what I want to emphasize is that the endocannabinoid system is just a built-in system that balances out that cortisol response. So when we have stress and it's ongoing, it can become dysfunctional. That fear and anxiety that was initially a good response now becomes a maladaptive response. Mm-hmm. This was what leads to people with PTSD, anxiety disorders, OCD, depression, all those diseases that you can't visualize except the person feels it from within. And that from within is now the body's trying to adapt or equalize that balancing system through the endocannabinoid system, so that it can balance out that cortisol response, which is a very tricky system. Go ahead.
It really is. I think this brings a lot of stress to a lot of people nowadays. You know, I mean, you see everybody like that. There was I don't know, I'm big into watching 60 Minutes. It's Sunday morning. I don't know if you ever watch those, both on Sunday. But Anderson Cooper did a segment on stress and cortisol and our phones, and they had him, EKG'd up, and they were doing something, and he had his phone to the side, and the producer was texting him, not knowing, he didn't know it was her doing it, but you saw his cortisol levels going up as he's hearing the phone buzz and hears the phone buzz. Yes. And Corinne and I were watching that, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is what you go through." And I said, "Yeah, I stopped. First thing you get on Facebook in the morning, you just feel." So I don't even do that anymore because it affects you. And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is something that's true." And so if anybody wants to look at it, happened maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you can go look at another segment on 60 Minutes. But it was actually a very well done segment.
Well, and that goes into a really important, I love that story. It's where thoughts go, energy flows. And, that energy or that thought of like, oh gosh, I'm in this interview, but gosh, I got this person trying to get a hold of me. Well, now your thoughts, you're not really there. You're not present, that whole mindfulness concept. And then your energy starts to shift. And that energy shift is towards a stress response of cortisol. Unknowingly, you're trying to be focused and present here, and you're over here. And it's interesting during this whole COVID thing. There's been a fair amount of articles about kind of trying to get people to detach from social media.
Yes.
And be very mindful of especially their morning initial steps. The average, like 85% of people, first thing they do within the first 15 minutes is get on their phone and read, their emails or some news. And I was to blame, to be honest with you, up until fairly recently. And I just said, you know what, I gotta stop doing this. This is not useful on any level. Now the first thing I do is get up and I go meditate. So it's like a lovely transition to go from a sleep state to another form of sleep state. And just kind of work my way into my day and get my thoughts connected to my energy and so that they're equal.
I was laughing earlier because you were talking about people, like this in an interview. Also in that segment with Anderson Cooper, he was talking to a doctor, and the doctors explained that, saying a lot of people will sit there and they're automatically thinking about all the other things they need to do. And Anderson said, "Oh my gosh," he goes, "while talking to you, I'm embarrassed. I'm thinking about my phone that's by my foot and how many emails I have." And he said it on the camera. They said, "You're so right." So that's great that you start your day, and I hope everybody could start the day off like that, from a calm state to a calm state, and make your way into the day.
And honestly, John, it came out of two major walls I hit over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
We're about 6 months into this pandemic, and there's been two times where I just felt where my wife literally just says, I just said to her, I got nothing left to give to anyone, nothing. Yeah. And I think I went through a kind of form of mild depression early on, where I was just kind of, detached from everybody's detached and what your normal is. I didn't feel like I realized I liked lots of non-essentials. Just going to the coffee shop or going to the movies. It was really, if I really started thinking about it, I'm like, this is really silly stuff to be really, first world problems kind of issues. But it made me step back and say, hey, where am I really anchoring? Where are my thoughts really anchored? Where is my happiness really anchored? And I realized that my anchoring is, I was anchoring it too much to earth things, the non-essentials, for example. Yeah. And realized through friends and colleagues who are, way better at the whole meditation thing than I am, to make me realize, hey, look, we need to anchor ourselves outside of this world. And you start from within, and it starts with your thoughts. And those thoughts, if they're positive, it's going to generate a positive energy. Yeah. And it's like gym work. I always say that meditation's like gym work in the mind. And if you practice it every day, it's gonna get stronger. Because there's days where in the mornings, there's days in the mornings where the whole time I'm thinking. Like, I remember one time I was meditating, John, and I remember thinking I did 20 minutes, and the entire time, I think 18 of those 20 minutes, I was thinking about my basketball team that lost the night before, and thinking of, if I was the coach, I would have run these plays. It was so ridiculous. And I look back and I go, well, that was useless. I mean, that was a useless meditation.
You got 2 minutes out of it.
But I realized that 2 minutes was valuable.
Yeah.
And it did pull me back. It did anchor me for a little bit, and it got my day going. And so it's important not to judge, your thoughts, but to try to sometimes step back and look at it from a third party perspective, kind of laugh at yourself and say, all right, I got to move forward. And that is a great way to shift that cortisol kind of constant bombardment onto the body, and pull it back and allow the body to say, okay, we need other systems to be working here. And if you don't, okay, unlike, look, we're just speculating here with your wife, but that chronic stress may have been a massive trigger, which it is for many people, and started her on that pathway along the river towards eventually that waterfall. It probably wasn't the only thing. I always like to remind people, it's probably never just one thing. That's why there's 5 stamps. Okay. But if, where stress and poor diet, these are the 2 most powerful hormones, cortisol and insulin. And if you don't heal those 2 hormones first and foremost, you really heal nothing. And the rest of it is just a massive Band-Aid.
Yeah. And then everything else will start to crumble, and then the immune system, and, let's talk about cannabis and the immune system. But endocannabinoid, the endocannabinoid system is one of 12 systems in our body. We have reproductive and your immune system. And you want to add to that?
Well, I mean,
endocrine system. I mean, it goes on.
I mean, I kind of look at the system from more of a standpoint of when you put in food, and all the systems that it takes to get to the energy pathways. Okay. So in the functional world, it's broken down into 7 pathways, where it's the digestive system, and repair, and then when it gets into the GI tract, that's the piece where there's a communication pathway. Am I going to be allowed to come in or not? Okay. And then transporting it, and then, which is the vessels and the cholesterols and all that. And then there's the mitochondrial pathways, the energy pathways. Then there's the detox pathways. And then finally, there's the group where they kind of overlook the final pathway and say, did everybody do a good job here? Structurally, did everything get taken care of? And so, yeah, I mean, there is different ways to break into the body. And honestly, ultimately, doesn't really matter as long as you're appreciating that the starting point is the same, regardless of what we're talking about. This is where I think traditional medicine, we have this tendency to get caught up on the details, not see the forest. And that forest is, hey, look, life is complicated, the body's complicated, and there's initiating triggers, okay, that can activate this process. And if not addressed appropriately, we're just going to keep floating along that river until we reach the waterfall.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes you a good doctor. You know, you take the mindset of all this and bring it together. Because a lot of doctors, a lot of people actually, doesn't matter whatever, you know, just look at things in the box. And I like your approach. I like the integrative approach, the functional medicine approach with cannabis. And I always tell people, you know, cannabis is not the golden pill, the golden ticket, you know, the end all. And I never use the word cure, but it is beneficial and it works. It's
a tool. It's a tool. Yeah.
You know, and to have that tool as well as that weapon is an arsenal if you're to battle whatever you're going through, if it's just sleep, if it's anxiety, depression. But can you talk about the benefits of cannabis in the immune system and the immune support?
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's important for the audience to kind of understand where I'm coming from. It's, you know, just kind of give you a little background. I was that guy in high school, the guy that no drug person really liked to be around because I would throw their drugs away. So if my buddies used drugs, they knew that don't use drugs around Kevin. I'm going to toss them. It messes you up. And so I was kind of like that goody two-shoe guy. And I've evolved from that. I think I was really extreme on it. I was extremely a little bit judgmental, frankly, because I saw its impact on certain people. And I was like, I don't want to go there. So I became kind of extreme when I was younger. Yeah. And then, you know, as a physician, you're trained to all these drugs. Like you suddenly become this, you know, and some of my, you know, patient friends will say I'm like a drug pusher. You know, it's like, and you kind of start to realize, shit, I kind of am, you know, and then you don't even realize you got there, you know, and then finally, then you start to realize, wait a minute, all these medications that I'm starting, they have a very built-in innate, you know, problem if you keep adding more and more and more, and we're not healing anything. I'm not against meds. In the appropriate situations, they can be very helpful, but we get too often where we get cookbook and we go, okay, this has this, so we'll start this medication. Yeah. And before you know it, that cookbook is now there's a menu of medications that person's on. And finally, I got to a point in my career where I was like, wait a minute, I need to start looking at these things as tools and not as substitutions forever. And so, you know, it moved into, like I worked hospice. That was one of my many hats that I worked in as a physician. And, you know, you start to appreciate the pain and the suffering that people go through. And my understanding of marijuana, for example, really started to evolve and appreciate, rather than looking at it from a social standpoint, started to kind of realize, hey, marijuana has a incredible potential to help pain and suffering, help with nausea, with appetite. And so you start to kind of realize, wait a minute, and this is how I think medicine has been really good for me. It's like, it kind of starts to help you learn that life is very gray. There's a lot of in-betweens, and you have to be very flexible. You cannot get caught up on just this one way of targeted therapy and thinking. And so with marijuana, for example, you know, I was like, okay, all right, I can wrap my head around that. And then I started to learn about it because some of my friends were anesthesiologists and pain specialists, and they were really all for it. And at first, again, I was a little bit, I would say, judgmental. I was kind of like, they're going down the, like every other Californian, going down this marijuana pathway. And they're talking as if it's like the end all. But I started to appreciate that there's the biochemistry, and that within the plant itself, there's 80 plus endocannabinoids. Only one of them is the THC that causes the psychoactivity, and everybody loves that one. But you realize that the second one is CBD, and CBD is involved in pain, and how our mind kind of views stress, or how it responds to it. And you start to realize it also helps with the immune system. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute here. And there's a built-in system called endocannabinoids. Says, wait a minute, our body was made to accept these cannabinoids? Whoa. And you start to then realize, hey, plants on this earth are connected to our systems. And, then you start to say, wow, we are really a connected organism. And if you look at it from that standpoint, then you start to say, okay, in these scenarios, these are excellent choices. It's not for everybody, but it can be in the proper situation. So now it's funny because I've become this full swing doctor where now it's like, I have a lot of patients who are always drinking alcohol. And in my career, the first 10 years of my career, I basically feel like I ran an ICU full of alcoholics, and I was detoxing a lot of patients, and I saw the hammering effect of alcohol on the body, and now I'm kind of like, hey guys, rather than drinking alcohol, maybe you should smoke pot. And choose the better of the two evils. Yeah. In a sense. I kind of joke around with them, and they look at me and they're like, oh wow, I never even thought about it. And I'm like, I'm not pushing to become a pot smoker, but let's make sure that we're not allowing society dictate the things that we're using. And look, a lot of people drink. I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people drink to just reduce the stress by the end of the day, but they don't realize that that's a toxin. Yeah. And that toxin, over the course of many years, is just another trigger that's leading the pathway towards disease. And I say, whoa, and then they're blocking it for the stress. So now they have two triggers that they're trying to waffle. And so then I say, okay, wait a minute, let's find another tool in the toolbox that's it's not a toxin, okay? And that's where CBD comes in. CBD is not a toxin. It works with our system that's built in to help support the pathways. And then they can start to manage the stressors in their life more easily and more effectively and appropriately in time, where they can step back and look at themselves from a kind of a third-party perspective.
Well, first, it doesn't sound like you were taught this in medical school, which a lot of the doctors,
no.
And doctors and nurses say, I was blown away. And the first time they went to a medical conference, and there's some really good medical conferences in this industry, and they sit there with their mouth just dropped, like, why didn't I learn this? And cannabis wasn't a lifestyle. You talking about goody two shoes, as you were saying, I call Corinne Mary Poppins. She didn't drink, didn't smoke, and she's like, honey, I said, oh, it's a compliment,
Yeah.
But she just thought, come on, give me a break. We live here in California, like you said, and everybody just wants to use it to get stoned. Mm-hmm. And then we were thrown into this because of her father. Mm-hmm. And we have the success of her father, with cannabis. And she just thought back. She's like, maybe it is beneficial for the body. And so she started doing a lot, and she's great at researching. Her dad's a Stanford grad, retired dentist. And so we started throwing, scientific papers to him. And he asked one day, he said, why isn't someone suing the US government for murder? I'm like, why? He's like, actually getting ahead of myself. One, they have it's under Schedule I, no medical benefits, but they also have it as a patent with neuroprotectant as medical benefit, CBD. And so, if we didn't live in a legal state that would never have come out of our mouth. May we try cannabis when he was battling cancer, and you know, it worked. It worked for him, and that's what brought us on this journey of just seeing the benefits of this plant. You know, there's so many different cannabinoids you mentioned. I say there's about 140. Some people say 80, 113, 120, 160, and they're more being introduced or discovered each and every day, and they all play a role. You know, with the cancer patients that we work with, like my father-in-law, THC was needed. He used 4 parts THC, 1 part CBD. So there's studies that show THC has proven to kill cancer cells while CBD stops the spread. Me personally, I don't think he would be alive if he would have been on a straight CBD regimen. So I don't want, I know the media has confused a lot of, I guess, people and patients and consumers out there. Oh, I have this ailment, let me get as much CBD as possible. And so sometimes you do need these other cannabinoids in there, right, and more being discovered each and every day. You being in Texas, are you kind of handcuffed when it comes to telling your patients? Because I was talking to someone yesterday, actually, who's also in Austin, actually, and I shared your information with them. And so you're going through a law right now where they do have CBD establishments, CBD brick and mortar dispensaries. And is there a law going through there in Austin right now where they're trying to put a hold on that or a block on that?
So it's interesting. When I moved here 8 years ago, California, when I was practicing in California, the couple of years before that, about the 2 to 3 years, everywhere it was, you know, marijuana stores were popping up everywhere.
Well, that's what got to say. We were 2011 when we went through my father-in-law's ailment and launching United Patient Group, and it wouldn't have been in our mindset if we didn't see them popping up.
And you know, again, we have this tendency. We're human beings. We tend to go extremes. And initially, in this little town of 20,000 people, we suddenly had like 3 or 4, marijuana stores.
Dispensaries.
And I was kind of, and then, there's doctors out there that all they started doing was just prescribing marijuana because they could make money off it. And it really put a bad taste in my mouth, to be honest. Because I just thought, okay, this is the extremity of human behavior, and people trying to take advantage of it on some levels. And then, but then you move to Texas and you see the exact opposite, where absolutely not. You can't have any, marijuana. And, the CBD right now, it has to be medical grade. If there is 0.01%, you could be closed down, end of story. Okay, so that's where we're at in Texas right now. Is there legislation going on? Of course, it's evolving, and there's a lot of Californians moving here, so it's going to probably push faster. But the bottom line is kind of recognizing how human nature is. You can see it in medicine is just as much. It's the more you learn about the cannabis plant. You had mentioned 140 endocannabinoids. I'm not aware of 140. I'm sure there's a lot. Okay. And I kind of see it kind of related to a little bit like growth hormone. And let me explain to what I mean by that. There was this growth hormone, push for anti-aging 15 years ago. And it's, you got to go on growth hormone. And growth hormone, has multiple, it literally works on over 300 pathways in the body. Okay. And yes, some of them are pretty cool. Your skin looks better, your muscles can build up a little bit more, your fat loss. But oops, it also raises sugars too much. And oops, it also pushes other pathways too much if you're constantly getting, and it can shut down your normal production, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The point being though, is that we realize that, okay, yes, growth hormone has its place. Within it though, is smaller segments. And within a hormone, like growth hormone, they snip it down into peptides. And so now peptides is a very specific order. Okay, so hey, you want great skin? We'll snip it out. Okay, and here is the peptide that focuses more on skin, rather than turning up 300 different pathways. Okay, and we kind of go a shotgun approach. Okay, we start to kind of narrow it down. This is where, this is how we've shifted in from that's how we got into the pharmaceutical world. In medicines, how we started kind of going, snipping it down and say, hey, what pathways can we work on? I bring this up because we got to be careful how we always look at everything. We have to say, okay, look at our history and how we kind of go, okay, it seems nice to break it down. And in the peptide world, I love the peptides because they generate a support to the pathway. They don't block a pathway. We're not meant to constantly block a pathway. That's not how our body's designed. It's supporting the pathway. Well, in the THC, CBD world, those are just 2 of the 140 endocannabinoids. And we're just starting to learn. And fortunately, there are great minds out there, really, and people like you who are saying, look, guys, we need to look at this. We got to say, hey, where is the benefits? How did was it the THC that really helped, my father-in-law? Yeah, it probably was. It probably helped dramatically with his nausea and his appetite that he was suffering from. But is it the whole picture? Probably not. Probably not. And so what are the other endocannabinoids? And hopefully, we're constantly evolving. And if we're open-minded to it and not get into that goody two-shoe attitude that I used to have, and to say, hey, look, we need to see the big picture and see that depending on where someone is on that river towards the waterfall, there's very precise things that may be useful for each individual person. It's not for everybody, but for certain people at certain elements of their chapters of their book, where they're at, hey, it may be fantastic.
You made a good point. It was funny. I rode up Mount Diablo, and you're from the Bay Area here on my I would say 53rd birthday. I ride that quite a bit, but on the way up, and I did a video.
You got a growth hormone. You look a lot younger than.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because when Corinne and I were going through her ailment, she said, "You're getting younger looking." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Your wrinkles have kind of disappeared." And I think, we took work off for 4 months. And it was just like, we just shut it down. We have great employees that just ran it for us. And I think, I was on high stress. Our doctors were like, "John, you are maxing your adrenals, be careful. You need to drink water. You need to, to eat." And when you're in that, you're like, go, 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 go. I was up every 2 hours with her. You know what? And that was the thing that was really disappointing, because being in this cannabis industry and doing as much as we had done for this industry and in this industry, she would just say, and she was someone who didn't drink, didn't smoke, and then she started doing a tincture because of hormones in the female body, but while she was battling pancreatic, she was taking the oils, using a vaporizer. That was the first time she ever inhaled anything. And she was just like, "Babe, it's not helping my pain." And she was just so disappointed that everything that we've been reading and studying and learning and helping others that had been working on, not everyone, but many, wasn't working with her. Where she found pain relief was hot tub or bathtub. And I was up with her every 2 hours, put her in the bathtub, hang in there, and I would just sit there and hold her hand and pray and talk. And, it'd be 2 a.m, 3 a.m, 4 a.m. And I just said, she would apologize sometimes. She'd wait. And I said, "Don't ever, Paul. I'll do this for another 500 years, babe." And so using an arsenal of whatever works, I think is important. And like you said, don't just be, "Oh, I'm only going to try this," and just be fixed on that. Sometimes it works for some people, sometimes it doesn't. Back to my health and wellness. You know what I do? I use a cannabis cream in my face. I take care. I eat it. The older I get now, I'm out every day, but I'm
going to start doing that.
Yeah. Thank you. My therapy and for me, and everyone's different, is to get out and go for a run, and I have to do that. I don't care if it's rain or
Mm-hmm.
sun or wind, but I get on my bike and I'll ride 30 plus miles a day. That's just regular or run. And, but it just takes me away.
Mm-hmm.
I forget everything.
You know, you brought up a couple really good points. I don't want to.
No, please.
Because I really, what you got me thinking is you know, going back to Corinne's you know, situation. It's really fascinating because she falls into a category that I think we as humans all fall into. And it was like, hey, I am not. You know, when I look at the 5 stamp triggers, okay, stressors, toxins, allergens, microbes, poor diet. She was probably, what I'm hearing is she was really focused on probably 2 of them. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to smoke. So those are the toxins. And I got the impression she probably was a really good eater.
Kevin, these are the things. I have sat in on MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering, Johns Hopkins things on pancreatic cancer since she's passed.
Yeah.
And they say, here are the reasons why you get pancreatic cancer. Alcoholic, didn't drink. Smoker, didn't smoke. Obese, she was on top of her health. Stress. With me, we had no stress. I mean, it was, and love. And I'm like, tell me something that makes sense, because all those, I mean, she lived, when I say Mary Poppins, she was.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's why I was
clean.
But you know, this goes into that paradigm that I always like to realize is that for Corinne, she was so good on the no toxins and the poor diet. Probably the allergens. It sounds like she was a really good eater, and she
totally
probably didn't have any food sensitivities. Microbes, if she lived a Mary Poppins life, maybe that wasn't it. So 4 out of those 5, you step back and you go, why? Why did she get pancreatic cancer? But then when you go back in the story of hers before John, okay, you know, that was a trigger. Her world was upside down. Fortunately, John, you and her, you know, that connect. It's just listening you talk to her about her, even years after she's passed, you can tell that you were just madly in love with her.
Oh,
I love
boy.
it.
Yeah.
You know, it's awesome to see from what I'm seeing when I see your face. But you know, that's where the body's really complicated. You know, it can start so early in life and be that trigger that kind of gets the ball rolling. Now, you know, for some, you kind of go, well, shoot, you know, that's so whatever happened in my youth, I'm screwed now. And, you know, but for her, she may have developed a very maladaptive approach, which she didn't even realize to stress for so many years. And only until she met you, maybe that maladaptive state maybe changed, because she probably didn't realize it could be that good for until she met you. That's not an unusual story that people will say.
I like
wow.
And it's funny because I look at that going, gosh, you know, we all have stress. I have stress today. I mean, we all have stress. So I'm not saying I live a stress-free life. I try to control it differently. You know, I've had stress 15, 20 years ago. I mean, you know, 30 years ago. I mean, I've had stress in my life. And and I talk with people today and just say, you know, even couples, you know, they'll say, you know, hearing your story, you brought us together. Me and my wife, or me and my husband, closer together for that reason. Because I say, you know, try not to sweat the small stuff. Work together. There's a reason why you guys have come together as a husband, wife, as a partner. You know, try to put that, because we have too many other surroundings. You know, Corinne and I didn't have children. You know, so we didn't have to worry about, you know, homeschooling right now. Picking, you know, taking the kid to soccer, to baseball, to tennis, to dance, to wherever, you know, your daughter's into, you know, and that adds a lot of stress on the families, and especially if both parents work. Maybe right now one parent's not working because, you know, I have a dear friend, and, you know, she got laid off and the husband's working, but everyone's at home right now. So, you know, to find that.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, I think it's really important to also is to stress about stress is that not all stress is bad. And, you know, again, nothing that's made by the body is all bad or all good. Kind of like cortisol. Cortisol is a necessary hormone, but with too much, it can be a problem. Too little, it's also a problem.
And you can do blood tests to see where your cortisol
Absolutely.
levels are.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I go through that in actually one of my chapters of specific biomarkers you can look at to kind of see what your chapter on stress, that section, that one trigger is looking like, and how to kind of give yourself a kind of a quick assessment of where your physiology is.
Yeah.
Because we all know, okay, that if you want something done, you give it to a busy person. You don't give it to someone who has no nothing on their plate, because they'll just take their time.
Yeah.
And so it's and we also all know where a million things can be happening, and that person is just cool and calm, and they're just like, okay, and then the other person has one or two things that have gone wrong, and their life is crushed. Okay. And so how we all respond to the triggers is also important. And it goes back to a really important principle that really started at the time when I first started medical school. Is at the time when I graduated in 2000, that was the year that the Human Genome Project completed. And that was the year that we thought, oh my gosh, okay, we're going to be able to transform, disease is going to go away. Okay, we're just going to manipulate little genes, and oh my gosh, we're going to all be superhuman. And boy, were we wrong. Okay, we realized that, about 10 years after the fact, an entirely new world came out of it, where now they have PhD programs in it of what's going on above the genes, epigenetics. Okay, what turns on that gene and what doesn't turn on the gene. And this is where we were like, oh, okay, so you could have all these shitty genes, but be fine, okay? And then you could have maybe a few, but you're screwed if one of them gets turned on, okay? And it becomes this kind of this like, okay, wow, now this is even much more complicated than we thought, and that the world of epigenetics started to come out. That's where I was kind of trying to simplify with the 5 stamps. 5 stamps, it really covers the major epigenetic triggers, but it's even more complicated than that, where we really need to recognize that it's kind of the timing. Yep. It has to do with, okay, what was the rest of the body state at the time when that stress came on? Maybe the body was great, and so that epigenetic trigger, not a problem. But with Corinne, at a time, maybe her world was a little upside down, and just the right kind of turnkey, and it's unlocked the process. She probably markedly slowed down her process from her Mary Poppins way of living, as you said.
Yeah.
But
it's funny. I'm a big fan of blood tests. And do you do that in your practice? Because our doctors are naturopaths, and I always say maybe in your practice, but a lot of naturopaths, you get a blood test A through double Z. And I always recommend this with our listeners. Go see where you are. Yeah. Go see where you are in there. And here's a perfect example. I was, we did our blood test, and I was borderline. My liver was maxed out like I was a drinker. Cholesterol was high, pre-diabetic. And my doctor's like, what are you doing? You guys are like my star patient, my star pupils here. And I said, well, nothing, working out, staying healthy, doing everything. And I said, I'm going to my acupuncture. She just said, are you taking any Chinese herbs? And I said, yeah, regularly. And she did a finger prick test. She says, come back. And next day I was loaded with metals. And so for the next 6 weeks, once a week, I did a ozone therapy. Ozone. And cleaned my blood out. And they did through the blue light, took the ozone, took my blood out, put ozone in the blood, and it went through a tube back in my arm, back to the PICC line, but it went through almost like a black light to kill the bacteria. And then I redid my blood test about 6 weeks later, and everything was back to normal. So this is why I share with our listeners why it was so important. I could have lived my healthy life thinking, I'm just taking my tinctures, my Chinese herbs, and there was metals that were in that. And which brings me into the cannabis products. Why it's so important to, if you're going to ingest something, put it in your body, make sure it's tested. You, the consumer, it's not up to you to go make sure that thing is tested, meaning get the test results. It's from the product that you're buying to have those test results done. Nowadays, they come with a QR code on the box. If you click on their website, it'll have a contact us page, but it'll have all the labs as well as the lot number that's on the product. And if they do not have that, go with another product. And that's across the board, from THC to CBD to all the other cannabinoids, from the tinctures to the smokables, the vaporization products, the edibles, to the capsules. And so that's why it's really important to see what's in your body, because you don't really know what's going on before it's too late. And if I would have kept on going on that route, Kevin, 3 years down the road, John, you have liver failure. And I'm like, but I don't drink, And so I think it's really important to get a blood test to see where you are, and to show where your cortisone levels are, and you're high in vitamin D, low vitamin D, and you can really see where you are. How we got into that was when Corinne hit 50. She always she'd get in the car and she would drive, and that was the time that she just could listen to her music, and her anxiety was coming on. And so she went and had her blood test, and they saw that she was off, and within, they were able to balance it right back out. And I said, well, test me. I want to see where I am. And so we've been doing that, I think, for the past 5-6 years, getting twice a year, getting blood tests to see where we are. If we're still, it's like tuning your car. You're not going to drive with your car out of tune. Anyway, but we keep on talking about Corinne, and thank you. I love talking about Corinne.
No, it's a great platform though, because for with toxins you bring up with CBDs and making sure that the product as well. This goes with the whole toxin chapter. Okay.
Yeah.
So with CBD, you get this, I go with Aspen Greens. They have certification of their product. But it goes with foods. It goes with, the makeups you put on. It goes with hair products. It goes with anything you're putting on your skin. All these things are potential toxins. And unfortunately, we live in an extraordinarily toxic world. I don't think people realize to the extent we literally in this country have over 88,000 chemicals that are FDA approved for everyday usage. That's just mind-boggling to me. And we don't have a clue, okay, how when you mix them all together, okay, what it's going to do to the human body. It's actually frightening, and yet it really shows the power of our body's detoxification capabilities. Because what's so fascinating about the liver, for example, I always remind people, God, or whatever your belief is of who made us, understood that we were going to really screw up this earth, because our liver has this capability of taking out chemicals that don't even exist right now. It is
in what way?
Powerful.
When you say they're taking out chemicals that don't exist, explain.
The metabolic pathways of how our system is designed through the cytochrome P450 system,
okay, as
well as the second phase of detoxification, has a capability, from science looking at it, of wow, it is chemicals that didn't even exist 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's metabolizing these things and getting rid of this. And these things didn't even exist up until a few years ago. It just goes to show that our God, our creator, was like, they are going to mess this earth up. And if I don't put in place some kind of filter to get rid of all this, they're all going to be dead in a year, And so it's really fascinating how despite all the bad we do to our body by choice, we all are still living. That to me is one of the bases of my books, is how are we all living the way we treat it at times? And it really got to the concept of what is healthy, because a lot of people will say, oh, I'm healthy. And in my book, I really break down with each of the stamp triggers what healthy looks like for each one. So, for example, stress. there's three things that have to align to determine if you're healthy into terms of stress, okay? One is, how do you feel? Okay, and only you can answer that.
Yeah.
So I always kind of go back to the concepts in my book. I kind of use the reference point of being a CEO of a company. If I have a company and I say, you know, I got all these employees and I got all these division managers and I got all these things going on, and I'm like looking at my books and I'm like, wow, you know, it feels like I should be making more money. I feel like our company's pretty darn good. And I go, all right, I gotta hire a consultant to kind of look at this, because I'm missing something here. So I bring in a consultant, AKA me, to look at you, okay? And you are your own company. So you are, you know, the Body Incorporated, okay? And I go in and I look at three things for stress, for example. I first say, I go to you and I go to every single manager and I sit down with them.
Your little one wants to come in. That's
yes. Oh, she wants to get out.
Excuse me. Get out. I got to go to the bathroom, Dad.
Aw, she's my buddy. She wants to get the heck out. She's all sick of talking. So when you're looking at the three alignments, I would talk to you and I would talk to your division managers. Pretend I was at your company. And I would say, okay, how are you feeling about what's going on? And you're like, well, you know, I got this thing's going on. And you're like kind of saying, oh, my company's awesome. Then I go to all the division managers and they go, he's a creep, he's an asshole, you know, he doesn't listen to us. And then I go to the people who work under the managers, and they're like, oh, we have all these problems. They don't listen to a damn thing that we say, okay? So that's part one. How do you feel? Okay. And in the world of stress, look, some people, again, you know, they say, oh, I'm not stressed. But when it really gets down to it, they're like, yeah, I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating well. I'm not doing this. And I'm drinking a lot because I'm overwhelmed. So that's part one. But how you feel doesn't tell us the whole story, because there's lots of people out there who eat like crap, for example, and feel fine. Okay. So then you got to go to number two. And number two is, I would walk around your premise of your company and I would say, all right, does this look like a nice building? Is this a pleasant place to go? As a customer, do I feel like they got their shit together in a sense? Okay. Is it clean? Is it well designed? Is it inviting? When I walk inside, is it designed in an efficient way that the workers can do their job efficiently? So that's part two, and that's what's called the body composition scan. So this is why I do a DEXA body composition scan on every single patient that comes to me, where it literally does a scan over their entire body. It takes like 6 minutes, and it breaks down their fat to muscle ratios in every part of their body, okay, to the gram. Now, what's beautiful about this is that a lot of people are what I call skinny fat, okay? And this is very helpful in the stress pathway, for example. In clothes, they look, you know, anybody would look at them and go, oh, they're skinny. But a lot of their fat is distributed in this android distribution. Well, that's an entirely different picture. You may be skinny, your weight may be within normal limits, okay? But majority of your fat distribution is telling us that your cortisol has been up for way too long and shifting the energy and storing it within the liver pathways.
Right here.
Exactly, in that love handle part. And so that's not healthy. So that part two, okay? And then part three is, okay, let's say I talk to all your people who work for you, and everybody's like, John is the best CEO in the world. I love this place. I love working here, blah, blah, blah. Building looks great. Everything looks great. And I come back to you and I say, John, everything looks pretty darn good. And you're like, well, gosh, then why are we not making more money? And I say to you, well, there is one more thing, okay? I looked at your Yelp reviews and your customers hate you, okay? They're talking crap about you. Everybody likes to work for you, but you don't listen to your customer. Your customer is not getting what they need, okay? And so that's the third piece, is what do the biomarkers say? This is what I call the Yelp reviews, okay? What are they saying that may be telling an entirely different story from what your body looks like and or how you feel. And so, for example, in stress, okay, it would be your cortisol, but there's also DHEAS, dihydroepiandrosterodione sulfate. This is kind of what I call the storing of energy within the adrenal system. If it's really high, and depending on your age, it could be a sign that you're in a good state and you have plenty of energy, or it could mean that you're too revved up, okay? And then there's what's called reverse T3, which is in the thyroid actually, okay? And this is the interconnections of our body. And reverse T3 is the off button, I call it, with metabolism. So if you have ongoing stress, your body has this way of going, wait a minute, we got to change metabolism, and it turns down the thyroid response, and it raises what's called this reverse T3. If that's way up, okay, what I talk about in my book, then it helps you realize, wow, my body physiologically has been under a lot of stress and I don't even know it. And so
that was me. My cortisol level was high. I had a thyroid issue, so I was taking these, and I was able to reverse it. And you can reverse this.
Absolutely. And what's interesting though, John, is a high may be an early state of stress.
Yeah.
But a really low first thing in the morning when your cortisol should be highest, if it's too low, it means your stress has been going on for months or years because you have burned out your system. It's no longer producing it. So the highs and lows you got to always put it in alignment with the actual story itself too. So this is what makes it really intriguing, is because I see some patients, oh, my cortisol is low. And I go, oh, no, you're burned out. You're not responding appropriately. Okay. And so that's, everybody like to call that adrenal fatigue. I just say it's burnout. It's stress. Okay. Stress in any form. It could be physical, like you were talking, when we were talking before a camera, with pain, or it could be the emotional component, or it could be someone who, gosh, I see this all the time, people who do CrossFit and they're 60 years old and they're working out with 20-year-olds and they're trying to keep up, and they burn themselves out, and they hurt themselves. So it can come really in many, many forms. Lack of sleep is another form of inappropriate support for the stress pathways. For example, that's another form of stress. I know that one all too well, of 15 years of doing the call. It's extremely painful on the body. So
sleep is so important. When you miss that one piece, it's a domino effect with everything else.
Absolutely. And so it's really asking those three questions for each area. And in the areas of stress is, how do you feel? What's the DEXA or the body composition showing? Is fat going up and muscle going down? Probably stress could be a component. Okay. And weight does not matter. Okay. Because you could be gaining fat but losing muscle and be the same weight, and so that's why I always try to remind people, we are no longer in the 20th century. We need to use 21st century technology, and this includes in the biomarkers. The typical traditional labs that I use as a traditionally trained physician, I wasn't trained to utilize a lot of these special biomarkers and think, and using these stories on a deeper layer. And so, yes, my lab, my patients always tell me that they feel like, a vampire is hitting them each time, because, it's a complicated story, and we need to make sure that we're seeing the whole book, so that I can really give you, as a consultant for your business, can I tell you, okay, this is really what's going on, John, and let's not reward those areas that they're doing fine. Okay. You could give them a raise, but it ain't going to improve your business. You need to work over here, buddy. And this is the part that is your problem. And if you zero in on that, boom, your body is going to, turn around. And that's the exciting part of my job.
And it sounds like that. And so it's fun when you see people come in and they leave, 10 feet taller, feeling like, what, I have some confidence I can bring this back. But certainly over the path of seeing your patients get healthier and healthier and healthier, and say, God, Dr. Hoffarth, this is what you did with me. Are you seeing in your practice right now, a lot of people coming in with immune systems and stress levels because of what's going on, or what do you see in your practice? Or more?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah.
So, I see what everybody else sees.
Yeah.
Every other doc. I mean, it's, stress is universal. Lack of sleep is universal.
Yeah.
Weight issues is universal. Substance abuse is universal. Marriage problems, relationship. I mean,
Life.
we're human beings.
Yeah.
And that's where I always like to remind people, it's like, I'm not working with robots, I'm working with human beings. And we always need to, the body is an important place, but the mind and where thoughts go is so important, and how our emotional response. I always tell people, I got the easy job. Okay. I just have to work on the body, where, ministers and psychiatrists and all that, they have to work on the emotional mind component. I do work on those a lot. A lot of my patients oftentimes say, gosh, I didn't realize I was going to have a
therapy session.
Yeah, therapy session.
Yeah.
But they start to realize, oh, this is the piece to my pie. I came in for, fatigue, but it's related to way over here, and I need to address this. Otherwise, that's what's leading to this pathway towards.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly just like your bio said. You're trying to develop a lifetime of good habits that will lead. My aunt, my first job in high school was Baskin Robbins.
Nice. Love that.
I remember she and my uncle are chiropractors, and they lived down in Laguna Beach, and I wanted to be a chiropractor. So every summer I'd go down and spend the summer with them. And I remember this one summer I got off the plane and I was so happy. And she goes, "You look like shit." And I was like, and I was sophomore in high school. And she said, "Do you want to be a fat little pudgy kid the rest of your life?" I said, "No." Kevin, she put me on that, and I'm 53 years old, and I haven't strayed. And because of that, I thank my health, my health to her. And so I developed, because of her, I developed that lifetime of good habits. And so reading your bio at the beginning, I was like, oh, I totally get his mind, his approach to that.
I love it. I love that, to hear that an adult stepped in on a young person's life. I mean, I think a lot of us are afraid to speak into people's lives, but you never know when that one little nugget, that one little seed can change the trajectory of that person.
And I have shared, even when I was in college, I waited tables, and I'm still friends with a lot of these guys, 30 years later. And a couple of them have stayed that path, like, what can I do? What can I do? And, they were, 17, 18-year-old kids, and now they're husbands, their kids have graduated college, but they got on, they stay on this route, and they said, "John, this is what you did for me." So what my wife, my aunt did for me, I was able to pass that baton to someone else. And I'm certain they did that with their kids and and it goes on. And so I just think that even with cannabis talks like this, and life in general, experiencing, grieving, losing a spouse, it's like a ripple effect, throwing the pebble in the pond.
Yep.
And what you've experienced in life, what I've experienced in life, you've been able to share it. And if you can reach one person, that's a success. If you can reach one person.
Absolutely. And just that one little pebble, remember, it's causing multiple waves.
Yeah.
And and when you study, I'm a total geek in the world of quantum particle physics, and studying that, and the whole idea of quarks and particle, all those particle smashers. I love all that stuff, because it really goes back to the realization of where we are, how we're built, and we are, literally actually fields of energy when it really gets down to the nitty gritty of who we are. And how energy, once it's released, how it has that massive impact on everything around us. And you bring it up, it's that one little tidbit. Do you want to be a fat little pudgy person the rest of your life? That one little nugget changed your trajectory, and I guarantee you, probably just by your life choices, you shifted some other people's trajectory as well, just by your example, without you maybe knowing it.
Instead of trying all 31 flavors, I had one. Type of thing. You and I spoke on another podcast one time. We talked about, before we leave, can you talk about immune resistance? What is, immune resilience?
Resilience? Yeah. Again, that's a big question. But so, once again, going back to the stamps, okay, the 5 stamp triggers.
Yeah.
If you're getting pounded, okay, with any of these stressors, toxins, allergens, microbes, poor diet, your immune system is in place to protect against these triggers, okay, in various ways. Our physical protection is our skin and our GI tract are the main ones, but also the lungs and the brain have barrier systems. And then on the flip side, if they cross those systems, those physical systems, then there's also the immune system. I mean, we've all been hearing with COVID 1,000 times about T cells and it's and vaccines and all that. Bottom line is, it's the body has an enormous capability of unleashing our military defense system, and this is when we get a fever and chills. This is just sending out the first part of your military response. Those guys that go running out with face masks painted and they got their swords and everything, and they're not really that good at anything, but they're good at just killing and hitting things. That's your innate immune response. It's kind of just going, all right, let's take out as many guys as possible at the initial first round. Let's shoot our arrows and kill as many people as possible. And in a very non-specific way, by raising the temperature of our body. Okay, so that's the innate immune response. But that doesn't kill everybody, as we know. Okay, otherwise fevers would take away everything. Okay, now the next specialized system has to kick up. These are the T cells, the B cells, and we've been talking. And T cells help destroy viruses, for example. And B cells, are the I call them kind of the detectives of the system. So they learned over time, these are the really bad guys. I have to unleash a little drone, and I gotta shoot them down specifically with antibodies. Okay, so we have all these systems in play, and immune resilience really comes down to the entire system as a whole. How resilient are you against an attack? Now, one of the reasons we're seeing people, this, what I think is fascinating about COVID and where we're at currently is, one of the reasons where there was such a fear going on, speaking of fear, in the science world, is we had no idea early on what this virus's game plan was. Well, 6 months out, now we can kind of settle back and say, okay, we have a pretty good general idea who it's hurting, okay? It's hurting the people with poor immune resilience. Who are those people? Well, 97% of the people who are dying are 45 and up, okay? Most of those are 65 and up, okay? What's the difference between that and the group who's under 15, for example? The under 15 group, to be honest, I'm not afraid of them at all. Our numbers are less than 50 deaths over the course of over the entire United States. Now, some people will say, oh my gosh, well, 50, if it was one of your kids, I get that. That's not what I mean. From a statistical standpoint, 50, okay, or I think it's actually more like 30, okay, is most of these kids that died had poor immune resilience to begin with. They had underlying cancer. They had sickle cell disease. They had other underlying symptoms, so that when the virus attacked them, they didn't have the immune robust response that most kids do. And what's the difference between a 15-year-old and a 65-year-old? The thymus gland, okay? And the thymus gland produces a peptide called thymosin alpha 1, which is a signal, I call it the bugle, and it tells all the T cells to come in and go, okay, guys, we need to ramp up massively and squash this virus? Well, young people have a really strong bugle, and their guys come running out, and they squash this virus through the T cells very rapidly, and that's why a lot of the kids are asymptomatic, and are, or for the most part, are asymptomatic. They're still carriers, okay, but their body is squashing it really rapidly. After 65, our thymus, by that point, after puberty, actually, which is interesting, it starts to involute. Okay, it becomes less and less effective. By the time you hit 65, you have practically zero thymosin alpha 1 signal. So now your guys are like, I'm going to put the snooze button on for a little bit. I'm going to chill out. And they kind of work their way up. And it takes like 7 to 10 days to build up a robust T cell response. Well, here's the problem. This is about immune resilience. They may, at 65, also have other health issues that their immune system is distracted over here. And so they're only going to be able to recruit so many, okay? Gotcha. And it's not enough of an army to crush the enemy. And the enemy now has had many, many more days to build up to defeat you over a younger person where they squashed you in just a few days. Where instead, we think we have COVID, you get tested, you don't get the results for 3 to 4 days. You have now just given that enemy, a 3 to 4 day cushion, okay, to build up and replicate at a massive size that now your army is like, ooh, you guys are a little bit bigger than I thought to begin with. And that's the immune resilience. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and I love all your. I'm a visual guy, and so I love your description from the bugle to the army to coming in there, your river flow, with the water.
I like the Game of Thrones. I was.
I love it. I love it. What do you recommend to your patients regarding like supplements and nutrition and eating right, getting enough sleep, water? Is there something that you can share with, any final words you want to share with our listeners of what they can do?
And this is
CBD is part of it. Cannabinoids are part of it.
I mean, yes and no. Okay, I'll put it into the yes and no category because part of the whole body, and I was trying to emphasize this, it's really kind of depending on where you're at in the part of your story. Uh-huh. But like say COVID, since this is where our world is at right now. For my higher risk patients who have, high fasting blood sugars, who have immune system distractions, we call them comorbidities. I call it inflammation, okay? The immune system has already been distracted over here, and they're 45 and up, or maybe a combination. I actually am giving them thymosin alpha 1 peptides, okay, to activate their own T cells. So to release the bugle when they get infected. So rather than waiting 3-4 days to get the results, if they, let's say, are, they have a loss of taste and smell, good chance this is probably COVID, okay? And so I'm putting kind of things like that on. So that's, the extreme, that's a peptide.
And will you repeat what you're giving to them?
Thymosin alpha 1, it's a peptide. Your physician would have to order that for you.
Capsule or injectable?
It's actually an injectable. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's an injectable. Now, and this is before vaccines are, eventually we'll have a vaccine, but we're not in the place where a vaccine, and I think we're a ways away from a vaccine, an effective one. So we got to use the toolbox that we have. Number 2 is zinc. We've known for years that zinc, and this was the whole hydroxychloroquine story. Okay, so. Hydroxychloroquine actually allows zinc to get into the cell, okay, where when zinc gets into the endosome of the cell, it reduces the virus's capability to replicate. So that's the whole point of this zinc and hydroxychloroquine baloney, okay, I call it. We've known this about zinc for years, okay, so it's just silly stuff. Vitamin D, again, this makes me laugh. I always get a kick out of this. In the traditional world, they're like, oh, hey, gosh, we're noticing that people who's low vitamin D, they're getting more sick. Well, duh, it's vitamin D is a hormone, okay? And we've known that it's not just for bone, it's for immune system resilience, okay? And so having high vitamin D levels, 60 to 80 range, is much more effective in a more robust immune response. Is it the only thing? Absolutely not, okay? I never say that you take this, it fixes this. The body's just too complicated for that. If you're stressed out of your freaking mind and you can't get your mind off things, or if you can't sleep, or if you're having pain, CBD could be a great choice for you because it will change the dysregulation pathways by activating those endocannabinoids that are involved in reversing some of the damaging effects of that cortisol response. So again, another great additive. But you bring up a very important point. We got to remember we're like plants, okay? And plants, in order to, like my wife always jokes that all her plants die, okay? It's, you know, to have a good plant, you have to not just put water, and you don't want to, in her problem case is she probably overwaters it,
yeah.
Okay? You got to have enough sunlight, but not too much sunlight. That kills a lot of plants. The third is you got to have the right fertilizer. 4 is maybe the pot that the plant's in, maybe it's too tiny for it to really spread its wings. So you need to take it out and give it some room, some breathing room. And then
or you maybe give her a cactus.
right. Well, I actually have.
Okay.
And then the fifth is love. You know, talking to it. A lot of botanists will say, you know, actually I talk to my plants. Okay. Yeah. And, you know, we're like that, where as a human being, we do better when we look at it from a plant perspective. We require sleep, we require exercise, we require love and connectivity. We require all these things. And, you know, sometimes people go, well, shit, that's a lot to think about. And I agree. That's why I say, get back to the basics, okay? During the whole COVID thing, go inward. Stop anchoring yourself to the things of this world that are causing you stress. Could be social media, it could be the news, it could be
caffeine,
but certain friends that are constantly talking about COVID. I have a few of them, okay? And I'm like, I can't talk to you right now.
Even politics. I mean, you can't, I don't even get into
politics.
That one.
Absolutely. And so kind of removing yourself from, because remember, where thoughts go, energy flows. And so starting there, okay, because frankly, the thoughts that are coming in is what's leading to those 5 triggers. The stressors, the toxins, I'm going to drink a lot, allergens, I'm going to eat all this food that's crappy for me, but it makes me feel good right now. Microbes. And then poor diet. Well, why not have that gallon of ice cream right now? I feel so much better temporarily when I do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so it leads to our triggers. And this is, you know, where the big picture, if we're going to, you know, end it with the big picture, is you work on your thoughts as the starting point to all your triggers. Yeah. You can simplify the hell out of this.
Good. Vitamin D. I'm a big fan of vitamin D. Both from sublingual as well as getting outside. What do you recommend to your patients? Run 5,000, 8,000 IUs a day, or go outside, or do you say both?
Both.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to get an adequate amount of vitamin D for production, you have to be in the sun between 10 and 2, with only underwear on or shorts.
Exactly. You know what?
And at least 20 minutes. Well, how many people are doing that? Okay, so, and then we tell everybody, put on sunscreen. And so we have literally shifted our whole community to a vitamin D deficient state. So from a supplement standpoint, I do recommend a lot of people supplement. Generally speaking, I don't like to give numbers out because it can vary from person to person, but you know, 2,000 to 4,000 is usually only enough to maintain levels.
Okay.
And so generally speaking, it requires more than that.
Gotcha.
So yes, I do have a lot of people on 10,000 a day, but I'm not going to tell everyone go put on 10,000 a day, because for some people that could overdose them. Yeah.
Well, Kevin, always a pleasure. I thank you. So one, if you could share about your book, how can they find you? your practice. I know you're in Austin, Texas. Do you see patients via telemed nowadays from out of state?
Oh yeah, I got patients all over the world actually.
Okay, good.
One in Dubai actually right now. Yeah, no. So you can my book is on Amazon. It's nice because you can get it in Kindle form or audio. A lot of people like audio now. I did.
So do I. And I was going to ask you because I'm always on the go on my bike or run. I'll listen to.
Yeah, I find it very useful myself.
Or stretch. You know, I do my own meditation and I stretch every night. And I'll just listen to books on tape or podcasts. And so I was going to ask you if you and were you the voice?
And I did my own reading, by the way.
Sorry?
I don't like when I did my own reading. I don't like when authors don't do their own readings. So
I was going to ask you if you did your own voiceover. And great. And so
and you can also get in paperback.
Cool. So do people know what paperback is anymore? You know. So your practice, the name of your practice in Austin.
So it's BioFit Medicine in Austin, Texas. You can go to www.biofitmedicine.com. There you can check out my links to my book, which is called Functional Medicine, the New Standard. But don't let that title just help, don't let it, for those people who are interested, it's not a medicine book. It's really about learning how to change your way of thinking about how you look at your body as a company.
Awesome. You said your website. You want to throw any last words to our audience?
Yeah, just really focus going inward.
Yeah.
Anchor yourself to your higher self, and you'll be good. All the rest will come. And John, I can tell that you're a guy who does that. I
try to,
I admire that. And we all get distracted. There's a lot of distractions in this world right now. And just remember, ask yourself, is what I am listening to or engaging in, is it giving any positive energy to me, or is it removing it from me? And if it's removing it from you, then you should remove it.
Life is short. Don't settle. That's what I always say to people. Don't settle. Yeah. If something's bringing you down every day, change it up. So, well, Kevin Hoffarth, great meeting you again. Great having you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Looks like you had a haircut since the last time I saw you. I haven't.
Yes,
I'm COVID. here.
No more COVID haircuts. My wife was doing it for a while.
You look good too. So, anyway, thank you, Dr. Kevin Hoffarth. Find him in Austin, Texas. Do you want to throw a phone number out there, or do you prefer people just going to your website?
I think the website is probably a good way to do it.
And we'll get the link out for your book on the site as well. And I thank you to you, Kevin, for joining us, to you, our followers, always following in and your support as well. This is John Malanka with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, John Malanka with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well. This segment is brought to you by Aspen Green. Aspen Green is just a handful of USDA, that's right, USDA certified organic hemp and CBD brands. And all of its hemp is grown from the perfect topography and climate found in Colorado. It is a family-owned business and is deeply committed to the science of providing only the purest hemp and CBD products for the best results and most beneficial experience. Its mission is to bring the therapeutic value of pure, organic hemp and CBD to people who seek supplemental relief through the use of healthy, natural products. Aspen Green is free from toxins and runs up to 8 different lab tests from bona fide third-party labs throughout its product line. It holds in high regard 3 foundational principles that guide every aspect of their business, actions, and interactions with their customers, partners, as well as their community. These are quality, integrity, and transparency. These will always remain at the hearts of their efforts to bring their beneficial products to consumers. Check out why purity matters at aspengreen.com and follow them on social channels at Aspen Green CBD. Use promo code UPGCBD for 20% off. Again, UPGCBD for 20% off at aspengreen.com.